Hello, welcome to Security, Cryptography, whatever. I'm Deirdre.
I'm not qualified to be on this podcast.
Yes, you are.
I'm Thomas.
And today is not quite an emergency pod, but it's a pretty special pod with our special guest, Professor Steven Galbraith. Hi, Steven.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me on your show.
Thank you for attending. This is a bit of a short notice scheduling, and we're all in different parts of the world. We're here because this is a bit of a day of grieving for one of the best well-known, highest attention, isogeny-based, theoretically quantum-secure crypto schemes, SIDH, super singular isogeny Diffie-Hellman. There's been a new attack published, a preliminary write-up of an attack by Wouter Kastrick and Dekru, and it looks to be a classical attack that fully breaks the SIDH construction in polynomial time. And by polynomial time, there is a Python script that broke the highest security parameter set, and I ran it on my M1 MacBook in 20 minutes, like an hour ago. Steven, you have done a lot of work in this area, both attacking and constructing isogeny-based crypto systems. Can you give us a quick overview of SIDH, and then we can get into this attack and why it's so devastating?
Yeah, so we're talking about post-quantum cryptography here. So we've got classical elliptic curve cryptography, which has been used all the time at RSA and things like that. And one of the problems is that quantum computers would solve the factoring problem, solve elliptic curve discrete logs. So there's a lot of interest in new ideas, new kinds of schemes that we can use for cryptography, but would hopefully be secure against a quantum attack with a quantum computer. And the other important thing to say about post-quantum crypto is we're talking about stuff that you can implement and run right now on today's hardware and on the internet. It doesn't require new technology to work. So we're looking for things that we can still use on our phone, but hopefully is secure against an attack with a quantum computer.
Right.
And there are various types of post-quantum crypto, and one of the most popular is lattices. And that's great. I think lattices are awesome. But I also really love elliptic curves. And the great thing about isogeny crypto is it's very closely related to elliptic curve crypto.
Yeah.
So it's not the same, because if it was the same, it would be broken by Shor's algorithm. So it's a kind of post-quantum alternative to elliptic curve cryptography. And for people who know what Diffie-Hellman is, it's really close to Diffie-Hellman in some sense. And that makes it very beautiful, very elegant, very appealing. And this idea really came out by Zhao and DeFeo in, I guess, 2011 or something. It's only about 10 years old.
That sounds right.
And since certainly in the last 5 years, it's been a very, very active area of research.
So to overview the protocol, as opposed to other isogeny-based protocols, which was a distinction we will get into after we talk about the attack. Basically, how you do SIDH as it's been constructed, and if you go look up the NIST post-quantum competition, whatever you want to call it, it'll look similar, but not exactly the same, because they construct it into what they call SIKE. The public parameters include a starting elliptic curve, some points that are on that curve, and these are all using a prime to define the prime order field that they operate, the prime order extension field that they operate over. And then one party will generate a new curve and some points, and those points are on the new curve, and they are images of some of those base parameters under their secret isogeny that they have constructed. And then the other party will do the same, but for these other different points that they operate over, they generate a different new curve and different new points that are on that curve, and they exchange them. Those are their public keys, they exchange them. And then you finish your Diffie-Hellman by using your other party's public points and public curve and try to apply your secret isogeny to their point and curve and vice versa. And you will eventually come to the agreement of a new elliptic curve, and you can take the J invariant of that elliptic curve, and that is your shared secret. So
Okay, so
yeah,
right.
hop in.
So right off the bat here, like the distinction between, and just I'm asking questions and playing dumb because I am dumb on this topic, right? But right off the bat, in like kind of conventional elliptic curve cryptography, we fix a curve. We just have a single curve, right? Yeah. So like we're all using curve 25519, right? We're not coming up with curves on the fly. But in isogeny crypto, we are in a sense coming up with curves on the fly, right?
Yeah.
So I watched Costello's tutorial, like the broadcast he did for Microsoft, and I kind of worked my way through the tutorial paper. So like, is it true that like in sort of the same sense where in conventional elliptic curve we have like a base point, in SIDH or SIKE or whatever, SIKE is just an instantiation of SIDH, right? So it's like the packaged version of it for
yes.
For NIST, right? But we sort of have a base curve instead of a base point.
Yes.
And then we have and then we have isogenies, which like an isogeny is kind of a general, like kind of, if you're not a mathematician, blows your head off kind of concept. But here, isogenies are kind of straightforward formulas that we're applying to points on curves. Am I crazy? I can't tell if you're nodding or
yes.
You're simultaneously. Deirdre is simultaneously nodding and shaking her head.
Yeah, I mean they're exactly. They're functions that map a curve to another curve, and they map points to points.
Yes.
Yep.
And so like we can kind of, we start with this like base curve, right? And then, and you have to kind of explain the math to me here, but like you can derive from that base curve kind of a constellation of related curves. Where we apply these isogeny formulas to take, some value with a secret mixed into it and hop from curve to curve in that constellation of curves. And you're Alice and I'm Bob, and Alice is going to wind up on some star in this constellation, and Bob's going to wind up on some totally different star in this constellation. And then somehow we're going to do some kind of sharing thing where we can share public information and land on the same third different star, fourth different star, or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically.
That's the hard thing. It's easy to go off in random directions. The hard thing is to make sure you end up at the same place. And if people who know Diffie-Hellman, Alice can compute G to the A, Bob can compute G to the B. And the key point is they can both end up at G to the AB. And so you're looking for some analog of that where Alice is taking some arrow or some function to some curve, and Bob's taking a function to another curve. But you need to sort of agree and end up with a kind of it's like a square. We think of these things as squares, and we want to get to that corner, the kind of opposite corner, and you need to make sure you're both going to the same place. And that's why you can't just get away with sending the curve in SIDH. You have to send these extra points as well, which is a real pain in the neck. And the cause of all our problems is the fact that Alice and Bob are not just exchanging an elliptic curve, they're exchanging an elliptic curve and a pair of points.
Yes. And the original constructions were over ordinary curves. I'm doing air quotes on the ordinary curves because those are the curves we're used to in classical elliptic curve crypto. And they were found to be weak against an attack. And so the construction moved to these super singular curves. So that's the S and SIDH. However, when we moved to SIDH, we became secure against this certain class of attack. But we lost that commutativity so that once upon a time, we were just able to use these ordinary curves, and then we would be able to complete the Diffie-Hellman square with just those curves. But we lost that, and adding these auxiliary points, these images of these, points on the original curve under your secret isogeny, allowed the math to commute and actually to let us agree on the same curve again. But people have been concerned that they leaked a little bit too much information about your secret isogeny ever since they were introduced. And there have been papers that have been like, well, if you construct your SIDH parameters just so, you can attack them using the auxiliary points. But they were never very significant attacks, and they were never against some of these parameters that we've been looking at for, going on 6 years now. Until like almost 2 weeks ago. And then all of a sudden there was a preprint, and it it took, as far as I can tell, it takes the auxiliary points and it takes the specific curve and is able to use the fact that you're able to compute most all of the endomorphism ring of the base curve and the auxiliary points, and is able to use them with this higher dimensional algebraic geometry that I had to cram a crash course on to get a little bit. And you're able to compute that secret isogeny.
So this is the point where we explain for the non-mathematicians here how a Richelieu isogeny works.
No, I don't know if we'll get all the way into that today. Steven, can you try to give us an intuition of how this attack, one, works, and two, is so devastating after very small kind of attacks for many years?
Yeah, I mean, I was as surprised as anybody. The auxiliary points have always been a concern, and absolutely, they were clearly a problem for SIDH. And my gut feeling was that there would be a quantum attack. I was never very convinced that SIDH would be secure against a quantum attacker. So my gut feeling was that there would be some kind of quantum attack that used the auxiliary points. But so I was as surprised as anybody when there was really a classical attack. Yeah, so how does it work? So I wrote up a little note this morning about the Carney theorem. So
good.
The key concept is a paper by Ernst Carney from 1997. He's a number theorist and algebraic geometer who's done a lot of work on when Jacobians are products of curves and stuff like this. Anyway, so he had this paper which just had what was needed just sitting in it.
Yeah.
And what it boils down to, so the key point to the attack is you have to go up a dimension. You can't think about elliptic curves anymore. You have to think about products of elliptic curves.
Right.
So you have to think about in some kind of new object, which is E1 cross E2, where E1 and E2 are elliptic curves. And so this is pairs of points, right? This is a set of pairs, PQ, where P lies on E1 and Q lies on E2. Mm-hmm. And you can consider this thing as something called an abelian variety. It's a generalization of elliptic curves. It's a very special case of an abelian variety. And there's notions of isogeny and so forth that live in that world. And most of the things in that world are not products of elliptic curves. They're Jacobians of curves. So to cut a long story short, the way the attack works, or the way this theorem works, is it says if you choose a subgroup of a certain form, then you take it. Subgroup. So isogenies somehow correspond to subgroups. I saw that the active isogeny is like quotienting out by a subgroup.
Yeah,
so
it's kernel.
You can think of an isogeny as being a function from one curve to another. You can also think of it in terms of its kernel. So kernel is just a fancy way of saying the things that map to zero. You can think of it as a subgroup. And so if you take this product of elliptic curves and you write down a particular subgroup of it, when you quotient out, and when you take the isogeny, this theorem by Carney tells you under what conditions you're going to end up back at a product of elliptic curves again, rather than the general case of being a Jacobian. So if the certain conditions are satisfied, so you can write down this product of elliptic curves, you can write down a subgroup, you can compute the isogeny because someone worked out how to compute these isogenies. That's the Richelieu part. And what the theorem of Carney says, if these certain conditions hold, then you will end up at a product of elliptic curves. Mm-hmm. And that becomes a test. That becomes a test you can use. I've got certain points. If these points satisfy this condition, I'm going to compute something and get a product of elliptic curves. If these points don't satisfy some relationship, I'm going to compute something and I'm going to get a random looking thing, which will not be a product of elliptic curves. Mm-hmm. And so and this theorem was just sitting there for 20 years.
Yeah.
And so the whole magic was people realizing, I can use this theorem. This gives a criteria to test some algebraic relationship between points.
An oracle.
And then it's actually relatively straightforward. I mean, it's the kind of thing that once you see it, you're like, holy shit, I could have done that. Once you see the trick, it's pretty clear how you can use this as a way of getting partial information, except there's one more obstacle you've got to solve, and you've got to be able to compute an isogeny whose degree is kind of outside your control. So you end up with this weird thing where you have to look at a number like 3 to the some power minus 2 to some power, and suddenly the shape of this number pops up, and the effectiveness of the attack depends on exactly what's going on with this power of 2 minus this power of 3. And so if we talk about the two papers, the paper that's clearly, there's been two groups of authors that have been working on this, not entirely in isolation because one of the authors is a PhD student visiting the others. They've clearly been talking about this stuff. So the theorem was known about and the idea was known about. And so the paper that's come out just in the last day or so, at the time of recording, so that's the one by Mino and Martindale.
Yes.
It sort of gives an idea of attack. And then the paper that's actually came out earlier by Kastrick and Jacrew, they've actually gone a bit further. So they've said, yes, you would get stuck here, but hey, if we know something about the base curve, we can actually push beyond this and we can push further. So the first paper actually goes further than the second paper, but they're all based on the same observation of Carney.
Yeah. And so that thing that you needed to know is more information about the endomorphism ring of the base curve. Is that correct?
Yeah. So you need to be able to compute this weird random isogeny. You need to be able to compute it on points.
Okay.
You need to really be able to evaluate it. And its degree is large and you don't have a lot of control over it. Right. So if you know the endomorphism ring of E0, then it's easier because you can somehow write, you can try and set up this thing so that it's actually an endomorphism. Yeah, or at least you've got something you could evaluate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to sound super dumb here, right? So I think that, like, the intuition behind what you just explained about how, like, we take these mathematical objects and we bring them up to a higher dimension and we can do some computations and we'll get something that makes sense if we, guessed right, and we'll get random stuff if we get wrong. Like that I like the broad kind of outline of that is like almost every Oracle attack works like that, right? Like that. So I immediately latched on right there. Like, that was great, right? So I guess my question is, like, is there a simple, like, intuitive way to understand what it is that we're guessing here? So I understand that, like, we're getting, kind of points on curves, and that what we're trying to discover is, like, the sequence of isogeny steps that were taken to reach those places.
That's it. That's basically it.
Yeah. So I guess another key factor about isogeny crypto, it's annoyingly not very efficient. So again, if you know about normal elliptic curve crypto or RSA, you know about the square and multiply algorithm, and you can compute g to the power a quite quickly by doing, the last thing you do is you go g times g times g times g a times. That would be madness. You do squaring and multiplication, and you can exponentiate efficiently. Unfortunately, with isogenies, you're back to the dumb thing. How do you compute a large degree isogeny? You compute it by composing a whole bunch of small degree isogenies. So isogeny world is kind of clumsy in that you really are doing the dumb thing of g times g times g, except it's phi 1 composed with phi 2 composed with phi or whatever. Mm-hmm. So in SIDH, when Alice is choosing her protocol message, there's this base curve, and she's computing a long isogeny of degree 2 to the n, but she's computing it by taking an isogeny of degree 2. So a little step, and then another little step, and another little step. So she takes n little steps and publishes the curve she got to, and then she takes these 2 points and maps them across. And then Bob does the same thing. He computes an isogeny of degree 3, and then another one of degree 3, and another one. So he computes some large power of 3 and sends that curve. So Alice's secret is really a sequence of isogenies, and so is Bob's. And it's always been obvious that a really natural way to attack would be to somehow recover this thing kind of bit by bit by working. And so some work that I did some years back on an adaptive attack, which was really using like a decryption oracle as a test. That's exactly how it worked. And we could learn the secret key kind of back. Well, it's sort of this is a little Indian or big Indian question. But essentially what we would do is you would learn the secret key bit by bit, which boiled down to kind of finding the path in reverse.
Yep.
You would work out what the J invariant was of the first step back in from the end, and then you would gradually go back.
And this is GPTR that you're talking about.
GPST. Yeah.
Okay. I'm allowed to get these things wrong, right? And like my understanding of GPST is it's named for it's the names is the authors of the paper, which is like the convention in cryptography, right? But my understanding is that basically takes kind of textbook SIDH. It's the difference between textbook SIDH and like something like SIKE that you could actually deploy is the fix for the GPST attack.
Yeah. Thomas, you know a lot more than you let on. Jesus. Okay. Now, my first question is, we basically knew that if you could compute the endomorphism ring of the destination curve, that you could compute the secret isogeny. That was like a fundamental security reduction of isogeny-based crypto that we've known for a bit, right? But this is if you can compute. Did we know that, or did we show that for computing the endomorphism ring of the base curve? I don't remember.
No. So
Okay.
the question of whether you want the base curve to be kind of special and have known endomorphism. So again, for context, we're talking about supersingular curves here, and supersingular curves have really quite complicated endomorphism rings.
Okay.
So they're maximal orders in quaternion algebras, and they're non-commutative, and they're quite weird.
And I still don't know what that means, but please go ahead.
Well, anyway, all it basically means is that you take a sort of one of your classic curves like y squared equals x cubed plus x, and all you need to realize there's something that acts like square root minus 1, and that doesn't commute, that anti-commutes with Frobenius. And that's an easy calculation that p is congruent to 3 mod 4, so I to the p is minus I.
Okay.
So you end up with this non-commutative endomorphism ring. Now, so there are some curves that you can just write down, and you can see very easily what the endomorphism ring would be. But if you take a long path in the isogeny graph, if you take random isogenies and then forget what you just did, then you don't know what the endomorphism ring of the curve is.
Okay.
So it's long been a question of whether you should choose the special curve or the general one, and there's been quite a lot of discussion about this in the literature. So there's definitely some protocols where you absolutely have to. You don't want anybody to know the endomorphism ring, and so you have to have some kind of trusted setup or some process. Because the only way we know to write down, this is also an annoying problem, we don't know a way to write down we don't know a way to generate a random supersingular curve without knowing its endomorphism ring. And a whole bunch of me and a whole bunch of people wrote a paper on this at CFail. So that's next week is CFail, and we have a paper with whose list of authors almost fills out the page limit for the CFail, and it's on some ideas that don't work about how to generate a random supersingular curve. So that's already so there's two annoying problems. There was already a bit of suspicion about are curves with known endomorphism ring weaker for some applications?
Yes.
And two, we don't really know how to solve that problem very well. So we've got a suspicion that they might be weaker, and so you'd like to have curves without known endomorphism ring, but we don't really know how to build them without some kind of trusted setup. So that was annoying as well. Yeah. And in SIKE, the actual NIST submission SIKE, they did start with a special curve for better or worse.
Oh, right.
So they really kind of, well, in retrospect, shot themselves into the foot, unless you're a conspiracy theorist, in which case you would argue that they would have been suspected of putting in a trapdoor if they'd done anything else.
No.
So it was actually better that they went for the weak curve straight off rather than being accused of having a backdoor.
Rolling my eyes as hard as they can roll. All right. I was just about to ask about it's so frustrating that you and others have tried to figure out nice ways to generate random starting curves like this. And it seems like quote unquote, our only hope might be to do something like this trusted setup to generate a more secure starting curve. But then the Martindale paper came out yesterday, and it seems to indicate that might not even, because that...
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I don't think so. So to get back to the main thread, so the original, the original 2-week-old Castryk de Croo paper, they're really, like I said, there's a bit where you have to compute this isogeny whose degree is a power of 3 minus a power of 2, or vice versa. And to do that efficiently, it helps if you know the endomorphism ring. So if you know the endomorphism ring of the curve, you can do that step. That's the one where there's code available that totally works, and it breaks the Microsoft challenge, and it breaks the SIKE instances, and they're all dead because they all start with a special curve.
Yeah.
So at the moment, we don't know how to really do the attack in general. And the paper by Mino and Martindale, they say it works for general curves. I don't want to be to sound ungenerous here. I mean, it's nice work, but I mean, what they're really saying is we got stuck at this point, whereas Castryk and de Croo, they saw that there was a problem and saw, well, here's a problem we can solve if we use special curves. So I mean, it's not that they've taken the Castryk de Croo method and somehow solved that problem. It's the other way around. Castryk and de Croo got to exactly the same point that Martindale and Mino did, but then they said, but if we do this, then we've solved it. So there's really nothing in the Martindale-Mino paper that's... you're still just basically looking at some number of the form large power of 2 minus large power of 3 and hoping that it has smooth enough factors. And I mean, this is really a stretch because you don't just need... I mean, you've got this random number. You want it to be smooth. So you want it to be a product of small primes.
Okay.
Why is that? It's for 2 reasons, right? 2 reasons you want small primes. First reason is because you can only compute small prime degree isogenies. Yeah. So if you're going to have an isogeny of degree 300,000, you have to compute 300,000 things. Yeah. But also because you have to work with torsion points, you have to work with points of that order, and they're defined over some extension of the ground field. What's the extension? Well, it's like L minus 1. If you've got a prime L, in the worst case, it's like an L minus 1 degree. Well, it can actually even be worse, but in the supersingular case, it's controlled. So you've got, I've got to compute 300,000 multiplications over a field extension of degree 300,000. I mean, it's just hopeless. So there's no, from what I see, there's still, in the general case of an unknown endomorphism ring, there's no reason to believe you'd get any loss of security. That's what I'm saying today. I mean, you would need new ideas you'd need some kind of new tricks, I think, to push beyond this, but who knows?
Okay, because I saw that yesterday, and I'm, in Vegas for all the hacker conferences or whatever. So I'm like, oh no, it's even worse. like our like last best hope, which is like doing something very expensive to generate a randomly generated curve with an unknown endomorphism ring, might also be like not even that great. Okay, so thank you. I thought it was even worse than I thought. All right. So now that several of us have a bit of an intuition of how we leverage this attack and the implementation that we've been talking about, the original authors of the Castryk de Croo paper published some Magma. It's a mathematical library that a lot of academics can use, but you need a license, blah, blah, blah. So a bunch of enterprising mathematicians imported it to SIDH, which is a Python-based open source platform. And they were able to get a naive implementation working, and it would break the largest parameters in like hours, and lots of quick improvements to math and algorithms in SIDH and in their script. I can now break the largest parameter set for SIKE in 6 minutes on my 20 minutes. It's a big 20 minutes on my MacBook Air M1 laptop, which is just ludicrously easy when we thought that was like a beastly, like turn it up to 11 belt and suspenders parameter set 2 weeks ago against not just against classical, but for future quantum computers. Anyway, so I will have a link to that in our show notes. So that's for SIDH. I'll pose the naive question. Is all isogeny-based cryptography broken?
Fortunately not. So yeah,
Yay!
so we've got SIDH, which is broken in a special case, and if we're feeling optimistic, it might be savable with trusted setup. But then we've also got several other things. So the most obvious one is something called SIDH, and so this is C SIDH. C stands for commutative, and but the name is a pun on the fact that there was some European research project workshop on an island somewhere, and they came up with the idea, well, they would buy the seaside. So that is different, and it doesn't have these annoying auxiliary points. So the good news is you're really sending just elliptic curves. So to get back to Thomas's question, you're still going from a curve to a curve, and so your protocol message is an elliptic curve, but it's even more like Diffie-Hellman. It's really like Diffie-Hellman. So Seaside is quite nice, but unfortunately Seaside is not quite so quantum resistant.
Yeah.
So there's a sub-exponential algorithm due to Kuperberg, and there's been a lot of papers somehow arguing that this algorithm is quite practical. And I was really initially pretty unconcerned about Kuperberg's algorithm, and I wasn't convinced that it was going to actually be a big problem. But I've gradually become convinced. I mean, there's a paper by Pikett on this that helped to change my mind, and work by various others. And so the problem with Seaside is we're not quite sure how big the prime needs to be.
Yeah.
And quite what the efficiency is. So it's cool, and it's great for protocols because it's so close to Diffie-Hellman. And there's lots of people writing papers about it and coming up with various schemes, which is nice. But it's a little bit unclear about whether it's really practical for actual like TLS or something. So that's Seaside. And then there's also more sort of general isogeny problems, and I'm thinking particularly about signature schemes here. So there's been a lot of work on signature schemes, and the signature schemes can be based on really quite general isogeny problems. And if you're a theoretical cryptographer, the point is that you only need a one-way function for a signature scheme. So you can really do Fiat-Shamir type signatures without needing quite the same algebraic structure you need for Diffie-Hellman.
Yeah.
So there's been a various work on signatures. I've worked a bit on this topic, and there's a very cool scheme which I didn't work on called SkiSign, which again, it's not entirely clear how practical it is, but it does have a pretty short signature. So this is still very much alive, totally unaffected by this stuff because there's no auxiliary points. It's based on just a special case, but still a fairly general isogeny problem. So so there's three things to keep in mind. First, Seaside might be saved with some kind of trusted setup. SIDH might be saved.
Right,
Seaside is very much alive, apart from the Kuperberg thing. And again, there's no reason to think that these ideas would have any relevance for Seaside at all.
Okay.
And then there's things like SkiSign and other signature schemes, which again should not be affected by this kind of attack.
Yeah. And then related to SkiSign and kind of signature schemes, I think it was DeFeo and others published, or was it you and DeFeo published the isogeny-based proof of knowledge recently?
Yeah. Oh, I hate that paper. God, that paper's
horrible.
Oh, it's so ugly. Oh, that's been the most painful paper. Yeah, though I have to say that's vaguely relevant for signatures, but that was really about the adaptive attack, right? That was more in the hope of getting non-interactive key exchange, because you want to do something. So yeah, this is back to how beautiful Diffie-Hellman is, right? Diffie-Hellman is the most beautiful thing because Alice can publish G to the A, and Bob can publish G to the B, And you normally think of it as sending each other a message, but these could be public keys or something.
Yeah.
And you can get this non-interactive key exchange, and what you want is isogeny versions of that. And C-side, yes, C-side gives you non-interactive key exchange, and that's why it's quite easy to build Diffie-Hellman-like protocols off it. But SIDH didn't because of this adaptive attack.
Yeah.
But if you would publish an SIDH key and a non-interactive proof of correctness,
Yes.
then you can get non. So that's really what that paper was about.
Yeah. I was very happy because I was able to start telling people, hey, you can verify this proof on your long-term SIDH key. You don't have to use SIKE. And so you can start slotting it into places. And then I had to be like, yes, it's a bit large. You probably want to just use it for kind of long-term ID key pairs or something like that. But you can do it.
Yeah, it was not very nice.
Okay, so
I don't know if Thomas has any questions about this stuff. I feel like we should.
That's mean.
well,
Just checking you're still awake.
Yeah, we're
No, I'm mostly following, but
Cool.
you guys are kind of covering where I would have asked questions anyways.
Okay, cool. All right, now we're kind of getting into speculative territory, which is sometimes areas of cryptography go through kind of a painful growing period where the first constructions, the first stab of how you do something seems all right, and then there's just break, and then they're like, okay, let's reformulate and we'll try to do this a little bit differently. And then we come up with a kind of more mature version, and that's okay, we had to kind of learn a little bit, grow a little bit, but this is the thing, and or something like that. And I don't have a good analogy off the top of my head, but I'm mostly kind of wondering, is this kind of giving us some lessons, some directions for research about how to move something like SIDH forward? Or do you think it's gonna there's been research about using hyperelliptic curves over smaller fields to do isogeny based key exchange and things like that. That's been an area. Is that fruitful, or do you think it's going to be more of these other areas or something?
I was sort of wondering because, I was in high school in 1993, right? But, I was wondering if it was kind of roughly analogous to, conventional curves and, the MOV attack or something like that, where, we've got, a special brand of curves that we're thinking about using, and it turns out that special brand of curves is totally janked up for doing, the kind of cryptography that we want. And then, for 10 years after that, right, you have Bruce Schneier saying, I don't trust the math on curves, right? Because there's stuff the MOV attack, which is not relevant to any of the things that we end up really using, but I don't know. Is this the moral equivalent of that, I know we're asking for predictions. But.
Yeah, I mean I think so. Yeah, I got into elliptic cryptography in the mid '90s when it was still very much a new subject, and that was absolutely the narrative. The narrative was that elliptic curves were so new, the mathematics was so complicated. How could you be sure it was secure? There was this famous quote from Rivest comparing it, to Chaldean poetry, and nobody understands it, and all this kind of stuff. And it was whereas RSA is so simple, right? Until you've tried to understand the number field sieve, and then you realize that RSA is not simple at all. Yeah, and the story with pairings is really funny, right? Because of course, there were elliptic curves were proposed. People even did choose supersingular curves for efficiency reason. There was some early papers that said, oh yeah, you should use supersingular curves because then you got this really fast doubling map and whatever. And then of course there was the paper by Menezes Okamoto and Vanstone, and also a paper by Fry Rook, and then they sort of killed supersingular curves. But then in 2000, 2001, pairing-based cryptography became alive, and suddenly it was oh no, actually some of these curves are actually good because we can use them for pairing-based crypto. And that became, that's still an industry, right? Still a thriving area of work. So it's interesting how the pendulum kind of swings between more structure and less structure. You kind of want the most general case because you think that's going to be more secure. And then at some point you're like, oh yeah, but there's this special feature or there's this gadget that I can use. So I'll go a little bit more towards the special case. And we see that all the time in cryptography, and we see that in lattice cryptography, right? So you've got the most general lattice. It's completely unstructured, and you have to write down a huge matrix to define the lattice. And of course, we don't do that. We do things like ntrue. We work with structured lattices, and because they're much more compact, they're much more efficient. We have fast Fourier transform to do the multiplication and all the arithmetic more efficiently.
Yeah.
So there's always this tension between the general problem, the general case, which we feel like ought to be more secure, and the special case that gives us more structure.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of isogenies, I'm not going to make any bets. I mean, it's really hard to say. This shows that, here was a theorem that was lying around in the literature, and boom. I mean, you say if you could break that in minutes on your laptop, it's incredible. Mm-hmm. So, it certainly tells you that the field is not mature. That's absolutely right. Here was something that we don't know that someone's not going to do the same thing to elliptic curve discrete log tomorrow, right? I mean, why do we believe elliptic curve discrete log is hard? Well, we believe it because there was 20, 30 years of people really studying elliptic curve discrete log, and we have good confidence that people like Gerhard Frey and Joe Silverman and Hendrik Lenstra really thought about it, and then lesser people like myself and Nigel Smart and we spent a lot of time trying to break it, and Takakazu Sato and Neil Koblitz, and there was a lot of attempt to break elliptic curves, and we gave lots of talks about it and wrote papers, and at the end of decades of time, elliptic curves were still secure, and that's the only reason we have any confidence whatsoever in elliptic curve crypto, right? It's just because a bunch of mathematicians looked at it, and this was always the problem with isogenies is not enough people are looking at it, and there's two sides to this question. You need number theorists and algebraic geometers to look at it, and it's fantastic that Walter and Chloe and Thomas and Luciano have done that and found this idea. But you also need quantum algorithms people to look at it, because if you're talking post-quantum crypto, you need to be sure not just that all the number theorists and geometers and people who understand classical stuff have looked at it, but also people with a bit of an understanding of quantum algorithms have looked at it as well. And only then can you be sure it's really post-quantum secure. And I was not confident we were there with isogenies. I think there was the number of people who really understand quantum algorithms and isogenies, very, very small.
Very small.
And so I'm actually not surprised that NIST didn't choose SIKE as a finalist. I'm not surprised at all. My prediction for the NIST competition was extremely bad, so I didn't publish it. But I will at least say that SIKE was not there. I just didn't think it was mature. I'm not surprised they didn't take it, and they've been proved to be correct because here's an attack.
Compared to SIKE, the impression I have is that we have, kind of like for the same reason that we kind of believe in conventional curves is the 30 years of research we've done on them. We're in approximately the same place on lattices and true and stuff like that. Like, and true goes back a long time too, right? So we have 90s, we have more confidence in the lattice crypto than we do in isogenies, right?
Yes.
I guess this is apropos nothing, right? But I was wondering when I was reading your kind of FAQ post on the Decru paper, was the theorem from Connolly, was that motivated by cryptography, or was that just pure abstract number theory work?
Pure abstract number theory, absolutely, utterly unrelated to. I've met Ernst Connolly. He works with Gerhard Frey, or he worked. I mean, they were both of a similar generation, and Frey got interested in cryptography, but Ernst Connolly was not interested in cryptography at all. I probably met him around the time when that paper was being published, and he was giving talks on this kind of topic. I may have even seen that theorem presented. I have no recollection. But no, I can assure you he wasn't the least bit interested in cryptography.
That's somehow more disturbing, right? Is like, because it suggests that there's other things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This kind of dovetails with something you just mentioned was Kristen Lauder, who was one of the people in the early 2000s who started looking at these supersingular isogeny graphs, not just general isogenies, which was a little bit earlier in the literature, but like specifically supersingular isogeny graphs to use for a one-way function, including, I think she published a hash function, a very slow post-quantum hash function based on this. And she gave a talk one time when she basically kind of articulated a concern about isogeny-based cryptography having a lot of algebraic structure, and that both allows it to be useful in all kind of the ways we described, but also makes some cryptographers nervous because it basically amounts to having a lot of avenues of attack on these certain constructions. Do you think that isogeny-based crypto is more vulnerable because of its algebraic structure, or do you think lattices have similar algebraic structure, but it's different, and therefore, like, does that make any sense at all?
Yeah, I look, for public key cryptography, there's always this tension between structure.
Yeah,
because if you're going to have something like Diffie-Hellman working, you've got to have some structure, right? You're not going to get this out of just random mathematics. There needs to be some reason why things come together. So all of cryptography is this tension between having enough structure to do something useful, but not enough that makes it fall over to an attacker. And this is what we see in multivariate crypto, for example. I mean, yes, we know that solving a system of random polynomial equations is NP hard, but you have to put a trapdoor in there, right? And so then you get rainbow. And braid groups was another thing. Braid groups are really beautiful mathematics, and yes, certain problems are hard. But if you're doing anything like Diffie-Hellman, you have to end up with essentially subgroups that commute with each other. There it falls over because there's various attacks. And that's absolutely the tension. And, it's kind of a miracle that it works at all. You look at something like elliptic curve cryptography, right? You've got elliptic curves. They're kind of almost perfect. You kind of, this is the minimal representation you could possibly hope to get. They're super efficient.
Yeah.
You can hash to random points. You've got pairings if you want them. I mean, you could not really dream of something as good as elliptic curves. And unfortunately, we've become totally spoiled by them.
Yeah.
Right? So everyone just says, well, why can't we have something that just plugs into TLS and works like elliptic curves do? Huh? What's the problem with you guys? And it's like, well, they're a miracle. Elliptic curves are a miracle. They work so well. And I see the NIST, NIST is calling for signature schemes with short signatures and efficient verification. Yeah, you think? I mean, that never occurred to me. We should come up with signatures that are just like ECDSA or something. Yeah, that'd be nice. If it was easy, we would have done it already.
Yeah.
So it's hard. So this is a long answer. I mean, structure, you can't get rid of the structure. And the whole story of post-quantum crypto is things that are slightly less structured than RSA and elliptic curves, right? So you've either got less algebraic structure, or you're introducing some kind of noise in some way, which comes with its own difficulties and inconvenience.
Yeah.
So you've had to throw away something to get it to be post-quantum anyway. And if you throw away too much, you don't have anything useful anymore. So it's really hard. It's really hard. And I mean, what we would ideally like, getting back to the maturity of the field, what we really want is diverse systems. I mean, the problem we're in now is that we only have RSA. I'm talking about TLS today. We have RSA and elliptic curves, and then we have our authenticated encryption and symmetric crypto, which is good.
Which is fine.
You're stuck with RSA signatures, ECDSA, EDDSA, Schnorr signatures, and Diffie-Hellman key exchange, and RSA encryption. And Shor's algorithm breaks everything. It's a problem of diversity. If we had more schemes, then maybe we wouldn't have had such a problem with quantum computers coming along in the first place.
Yeah.
And so obviously what we would like for the future is to have more variety of computational assumptions, so we're not putting all our eggs in one basket. And at the moment, we're kind of, the way NIST is going, we're kind of putting all our eggs into structured lattices.
Yeah.
I mean, I like them. They're good. But, you would like to have more diversity and so that, you're not at the mercy of just one new idea.
Yeah. What's Michaelis? Is that codes or
that's
multivariate?
codes.
It's codes. Was that in round 3?
Michaelis is an alternate. Yeah, classic Michaelis is also one of the round 4 candidates. Yeah.
All right. So you're not exactly hopeful, but
I'm not super hopeful about isogenies. But you've got to be the thing I've been holding on to is you've got to be gracious in defeat. So I'm not going to name names. But there's over the NIST competition. There've been some very sore losers who have not taken kindly to being broken, and I'm very proud of the isogeny community that we're David Zhao, Luca De Feo. I mean, really the inventors of it were Zhao and De Feo. They were the inventors of SIDH, and you can imagine both of them are feeling a bit grumpy about it. But right from the get go. They've been utterly gracious about it. I mean, David Zhao's been interviewed. He was in a piece in Ars Technica, and he was very gracious about it and very quick to acknowledge the good work. Luca De Feo was writing sarcastic tweets within hours. And that's how to be. How to be is to go, damn, that's good work. Yep, we'll have to wait and see. And it's not over. But you've got to at least be gracious about it and not be a dick like some other people over the years.
What do you mean you don't like 1,000 terabyte sized RSA keys? Like, that's post quantum secure, right?
It's a nice idea, actually. I like that idea.
It's pretty straightforward. I will say that I was down when I saw the news about this attack because isogenies helped draw me into a career in doing cryptography in some way. I love them. I think they're beautiful and they're my faves. But learning the mathematics to understand this attack, the Castric-de-Creux attack, has been fun. And then watching other people implement this attack in SAGE and speed it up and just algorithms and speeding up these Richelieu isogenies and this, that, and the other thing has been really, really cool. And so that's kind of helped me work through my grief, I guess. Yeah. Steven Galbraith, thank you so much for joining us and making the time. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Thanks. I enjoyed it too.
Yay. Awesome. All right. I'm going to hit the button.